Welcome to yet another exciting adventure of Darth and Joe Vader, the continuing adventure of Darth and Joe Vader when Darth was 7 and Joe was just 5 years old. Alright, I'll stop talking like that. This is a story of Darth and Joe Vader. I'm telling you the story. Right now, I'm on the highway. There are cars all around me. I don't know if you can hear the sounds of them driving by, but they're all following me because they too want to know the story of Darth and Joe Vader that I'm about to tell you. Because this is a secret story. This story has not been told in more than 1,200 years. It's actually against the law to tell this story. But I've been given special permission by the High Council of the Priestess of the Galaxy to tell you this story of Darth and Joe Vader. But when you hear this story, I want you to be responsible with it. Don't just go telling it to anybody. Make sure that you don't use this story to harm other people. Don't use this story to kill anybody. This is a very powerful story. It could explode at any second. This story is all about Darth and Joe Vader. As I said, Darth was 7, almost 8. Joe was 5, almost 6. And then we drive by this huge truck. They want the story too. I think I can outrun them. Okay. Well, Darth and Joe Vader were their friend Jar Jar up on planet Scorpiop. Scorpiop is a beautiful planet consisting entirely of ping pong balls painted different colors. And it's fun to walk on this planet because you have to swim your way through the ping pong balls. But even if you're sort of drowning in ping pong balls, there's always plenty of air to breathe in between the ping pong balls, so it's not quite like being underwater and not being able to swim. So there are some people actually in the interior of the planet who were trying to swim across it, who started sinking and were not able to swim back up to the surface, and some of them have been there for years. But the great thing about planet Scorpiop is that the ping pong balls are entirely edible. They come in different flavors and sizes, although the sizes are almost identical, so you can't really tell the different sizes by just looking at them. And they come in a magnificent array of flavors. There's the banana walnut, banana vanilla, banana strawberry, banana, and then there is also the usual eggplant artichoke flavor, which is just magnificent. So Darth and Joe and Jar Jar were on this planet, and Jar Jar was having a little bit of difficulty. He kept tripping and falling deep head first into the ping pong balls, and Darth and Joe would grab his feet and pull him back up to the surface. And they were swimming along, trying to get to Manchester Island, which is a island. It's one of the only places on the planet. There are 7 islands on the planet, although there are only really 6. And one of them is a planet that's covered entirely by small pieces of marshmallows. And you have to be very careful where you walk because the marshmallows are alive and they have feelings, and if you squish them, they squeal. Eek! And then you have to apologize. If you don't apologize for stepping on the marshmallows, then the marshmallow army comes out to attack you. And even though they can only really throw marshmallows at you, and you can hardly feel it really. It doesn't really hurt that much. People usually feel so sorry for them that they pretend to be hurt because they feel sorry for a whole marshmallow army that can only shoot marshmallows. And so then people pretend to fall down, but that makes it worse because you fall down on top of marshmallows, which hurts them, causes them to squeak, and so most people just leave the island, just go right back into the ping pong ocean and leave the island immediately. But Darth and Joe and Jar Jar weren't leaving the island. They were very careful, and Jar Jar not step on ping pong marshmallow, but Jar Jar was just about to step on a ping pong marshmallow on the island, and when Darth reached out his hand and grabbed his foot and said, "Careful, Jar Jar," and Joe and Darth decided that they could levitate Jar Jar using the Force. They aimed their hands at him so he wouldn't have to walk on the ground, and Darth and Joe walked, being very careful not to step on the marshmallows, and Jar Jar they held levitated in the air just about at their shoulder level while they were walking up to the castle. There's a very small castle on the hill on top of this Manchester Island place. The castle is colored bright blue and orange, and that means whenever the castle is covered blue and orange, it means there's an emergency. And the people of Manchester Island, or Marshmallow Island as I like to call it, are trying to reach a Jedi. That's their signal when they turn the castle blue and orange, that they needed to talk to a Jedi because there's an emergency, and that's why Jar Jar and Darth and Joe, who were out flying in their spaceship at the time, and when they saw the signal from space, landed on this planet. And they couldn't land too close to the island itself because that would cause waves in the ping pongs, and there would be a flood of ping pongs on top of the marshmallow people. So they had to land pretty far away, and which is a problem because their spaceship sank in the ping pong balls. But they figured they'd raise the spaceship just like Yoda taught Luke Skywalker to do, to raise the spaceship out of the swamp. So there they were on Manchester Island, being very delicate about where they stepped, and finally they got to the top of the hill that had no marshmallows on it, and they lowered Jar Jar so he could stand. And Jar Jar said, "There are no apples on this island." And Darth said, "No, don't you remember we came here because of the emergency? There are no emergency apples on this planet." Well, we'll get you some apple-flavored ping pong balls, Jar Jar. Oh, Jar Jar, love apple-flavored ping pong apples. And so that kind of placated him, and he was happy. And so they open up the castle door, and who should they see? No, they shouldn't. Instead, they didn't see anybody. They looked around, and there was a computer that had been left on that was flashing a message, and the message said, message to Jedis, but it was written in a code. Darth and Joe, and for that matter, Jar Jar, because they were Jedis, they knew how to read the code, because otherwise, so if a stranger came, it wouldn't look like it said anything. It would look like, which doesn't mean anything to anybody except for Darth and Joe and the other Jedis, like Jar Jar. And it actually means message to Jedis, emergency. Scranton Bob is feeling a little under the weather and is not able to make his appointment to keep the Broddock from attacking planet Nisbeth. The Broddock, that sounds familiar. If that sounds familiar, said the message, it is because the Broddock attacked Nisbeth twice before in our fragile history. Well, what is the Broddock? Asked Joe. If you are asking what the Broddock is, the message continued, the Broddock is a large mushroom, the size of 3 ordinary Type M planetary systems. Oh, that sounds terrible. Why does the Broddock attack Nisbeth? And what does the Broddock want with Nisbeth? And the message said, "You're probably wondering what the Broddock wants with Nisbeth. Well, we don't know. Stop asking such annoying questions. Now get out there and save it, quick." And the computer turned off. So, Darth and Joe said, "Well, we're Jedis. We have to go save this Nisbeth planet." "Right," said Joe. "Let's go." And they managed to levitate Jar Jar and walk to the edge of the mushroom planet, and they put him down so that they could go back swimming in the ping pong balls to where their spaceship was. But suddenly, Jar Jar accidentally stepped on a marshmallow, and then he jumped off it, and he landed right on his bum on top of 3 marshmallows. And then he got up and his tail hit a marshmallow, and every time he moved, and pretty soon the marshmallow army was out there. And it was a very fierce little marshmallow army too. "You have stepped on our fellow marshmallows, and now we will attack. Prepare to meet your doom." And Jar Jar said, "Me not hear you. Prepare to meet my womb? Your doom! Your doom! Prepare to go to my room? No. Prepare to meet your doom." "Your doom juice apple for Jar Jar?" "No, Jar Jar. This has nothing to do with apples. They're going to kill you now." And the marshmallows started attacking. They threw little miniature marshmallows at Jar Jar. "Marshmallows flavored apples? No, Jar Jar, those are marshmallow bullets. They're killing you." "Oh!" Jar Jar dying, and Jar Jar jumped into the water on his back. And Darth and Joe said, "You have killed Jar Jar." And the marshmallow army said, "Well, he shouldn't have stepped on our fellow marshmallows. Now be gone." And they went back into their marshmallow caves. And so Darth and Joe swam out into the ping pong sea, and Jar Jar was swimming with them because he was really just pretending to be killed. And they swam to where the spaceship used to be, and now it was way below them. How are we going to levitate it, said Darth to Joe, because look, we're not even on solid land ourselves. It's going to be very hard. We will use the Force. Jar Jar, you help us. And Jar Jar said, Jar Jar used Apple Force. And they held hands in a circle, and they concentrated on raising the spaceship up from within the ping pong balls. And they concentrated, and the spaceship started going lower. Hey, Jar Jar! And then they looked over, and Jar Jar's head was upside down. Jar Jar, straighten your head out. Oh, Jar Jar, sorry, Jar Jar thought Ocean was upside down. No, 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 it was you, Jar Jar, it was your head. And they straightened Jar Jar's head out, and then the spaceship started rising upward to the surface. And pretty soon there it was, their magnificent cloaking device-equipped spaceship. And Darth and Joe and Jar Jar got into the spaceship, but not until Jar Jar had scooped up a whole bunch of red ping pong balls because they looked like they might be apple-flavored. When they got into outer space, Jar Jar started tasting them, and Jar Jar said, "These not apple-flavored, these cherry-flavored." And they said, "Oh, we're sorry, Jar Jar, don't worry, we'll get you some apple-flavored something or other on this adventure soon." Jar Jar wait. And so they took off to planet Nisbeth. The Borak was dangerously large. The Borak is a huge marshmallow that attacks planets. Nobody seems to know why. The Borak was attacking planet Nisbeth. That's the sound of their spaceship. And they got close to the Borak, and they decided, maybe we can change courses, and maybe we can make the Borak not hit the planet. Good thinking, said Darth. And so they set course, and they rammed their spaceship into the Borak. But the Borak was very spongy and bouncy, and they bounced right out again with having no effect whatsoever. And the Borak got closer to Nisbeth. Why? Why does the Borak want? And suddenly, Legatron, their mechanical, intelligent leg friend, started jumping up and down. You want to kick the Borak? They said. And Legatron started jumping up and down, meaning yes, yes, yes. And so they attached Legatron to their spaceship on the outside. They flew very close, and Legatron kicked the Borak. And there was nothing at first. And Legatron got ready to kick again when suddenly they heard a grumbling sound. Ouch! Said the Borak. Well, it felt you, at least, said Darth. And Legatron got back in the spaceship. The Borak was still moving toward Nisbeth. What were they going to do? Who can stop the Borak? I said, who can stop the Borak? I said, I heard you, said the doctor. Don't have to be so dramatic about it. No, I don't think I know how to stop the Borak. Well, you can time lasso it, can't you? Yes, I could if I had a time lasso the size of 3 Type N planetary systems, but my time lasso is only this long, said the doctor, and he held it out, and it was about 20 feet long. And he said, sometimes it's this long, and he flipped it, and it was about 35 or 40 feet long now, but still not nearly long enough to circle around the entire Borak. What do Boraks like? Asked the doctor. They like planet Nisbeth, they said. Yes. Why do Boraks like planet Nisbeth? Said the doctor. I don't know. What is the chief agricultural product produced by planet Nisbeth? Asked the doctor. Well, let's ask the computer. Computer, what is the chief... I heard you, said the computer. It's kind of a tired, sarcastic computer. It was tired of everybody repeating questions to them. Computer, what is the... Yeah, you want to know what the chief agricultural product produced by Nisbeth is, right? That's right, computer. Well, I'm not telling you. What? No, and I'm not what? My name is the computer. You will address me as the computer. You need to show me some respect. I mean, where would you be out with me, without me? I'm the computer. I run this thing. Oh, yeah, you tell me what to do, but if it wasn't for a computer, where would you get? Nowhere, that's where. Okay, we're sorry, computer. Are you sorry about repeating your question before, and you promised just to ask me once from now on? Yes, we'll do our best, computer, said Darth. And then he whispered to Joe, this computer needs to be reprogrammed. Yeah, said Joe. And the computer said, the chief agricultural product of Nisbet is... And they said, computer, how come you're talking like a computer suddenly? I'm programmed, said the computer. I'm programmed when I give answers to talk like a computer. That's what they program me to do. Don't argue with me, argue with my programmers. I'm just doing what I'm programmed to do. Okay, we're sorry. Sheesh. All right, so what's the chief out? Are you going to ask me the same question again, said the computer. No, please continue. Okay. The chief agricultural product of planet Nisbeth, as I was saying just a minute ago, is mushrooms. Mushrooms? Mushrooms. Please don't ask me again. Wow. Mushrooms, said Joe. You can stop saying mushrooms now, said the computer. That must mean something. It is, after all, a giant mushroom eating it. Exactly, said the doctor. The reason this mushroom, Borak, is attracted to planet Nisbeth are all the other little mushrooms. It wants to absorb them into its body. It's not exactly eating them, it's combining them with them. It wants to free the mushrooms from Nisbeth, that is. Nisbeth or Nisboth? Asked Joe. Well, this is planet Nisbeth. Nisboth is just around the corner, see over there? But its chief agricultural product are pretzels. So it doesn't actually it might have a giant pretzel shape coming after it, I don't know, but it doesn't have a giant mushroom creature attacking it at this moment. Well, how are we going to lure it away from Nisbeth if Nisbeth is full of mushroom smell? I mean, we can't give it all of Nisbeth's mushrooms because the people of Nisbeth need their mushrooms. That's right, said Jar Jar. Nisbethians sell mushrooms to the Cronus Council in exchange for apples and then give apples to Jar Jar. Well, that's kind of a simple economic theory, said Darth, but that's something like that. We have to protect planet Nisbeth, or even Nismith. That's right, said Joe. Whatever the name of this planet is, we're going to protect it from that giant mushroom. Well, stop talking about it, said the doctor, and do something. Right. Like what? Well, I was thinking we could use the pheromone or the scent of mushrooms concentrated into a liquid, into a super mushroom smell that would, and leave a trail of it through space, and that would pull the mushroom away from Nisbeth. Right, let's get on it. And quickly the doctor punched in some buttons in the computer in his kitchen, because that's where usually he kept the artificial mushrooms, and produced a cream of mushroom smell soup. And it smelled like the most amazing mushroom. It was so mushroomy, they'd never smelled anything like that. And they grabbed it and they started dripping it into space and flying away from Nisbeth. And sure enough, the Borak started chasing them. The Borak started chasing Darth and Joe's ship, which also the TARDIS was inside of the ship. Sally was eating delicious blueberry pancake dinner right at that moment. And they flew away from Nisbeth, and the Borak flew after them. Well, where are we going to take this thing? Exactly, said the doctor. No, I mean, what, is the planet called exactly? No. You asked where we're going to take it. Right, where are we going to lead this Borak? Asked Darth and Joe. That's right. What's right? Where are we going to lead it? Right, that's what we're asking you. Where are we going to lead this Borak? We need to take it somewhere. No, we can't take it somewhere. We have to take it where? I don't know. Where? You do know then. What do I know? Said Darth. You know where we're taking this planet, this Borak, right? No, said Darth. That's why he's asking you, said Joe. Asking me what? Not what. We're asking you, where are we taking the Borak? And Jar Jar said, Apple Planet? And the doctor said, no. We are taking the Borak to where? Oh, said Darth. Where is the name of the planet to which we are taking the Borak? That is correct, said the doctor. We are taking the Borak to planet where? Where is where, said Joe. Ah, you would like to know the location of where, said the doctor. Yes, said Joe. And so they typed it. And it was very close to Darth and Joe's planet. There is actually a planet called where the doctor had already radioed ahead on his keyboard for a friend of his named Dr. Cucumber Banana Stick, who's not actually a Time Lord, to go ahead and plant some mushrooms. By the way, how come you helped us? Asked Joe to the doctor. I mean, this isn't really a time problem, is it? And the doctor said, well, I had some time on my hands. I didn't want to kill time. You know, time is a precious thing. There's always time enough for... Yes, we got the idea. Okay, thanks for dropping by. No problem, said the doctor. And then Darth thought of something. Wait a minute. Isn't Planet Where dangerously close to the galaxy's largest pizza restaurant? What if they try to turn the Borak into a giant mushroom pizza? You have a point, said Joe. What about it, said the doctor. And the doctor said, I don't know, my problem is getting this Borak to a planet even bigger than the Borak, so it'll just graze around, and that's Planet Where. It'll graze around and eat mushrooms and won't be attacking any more planets, because we can artificially keep the mushrooms growing at a rate that will satisfy the voracious appetite of the Borak. Fascinating, said Darth, but our problem is there's a giant pizza restaurant floating right next to, practically one and a half parsecs away from Where, and with a giant mushroom like Borak, I think they might decide to turn him into a pizza. Well, we'll have to talk to them, said the doctor. Right, said Joe. Right, said Darth. Apple, said Jar Jar. And so after they took the Borak to Planet Where, they went and talked to the pizza place. And the pizza person named Penelope the pizza person, Penelope makes perfect pizza for the people. It has a perfectly pretty pizza for every person, professionally made, served promptly at a good price. That's her motto. And she was there, and she said, wow, you guys have brought me a humongous mushroom. I'll never run out of mushroom again. They said, no, we don't want you to kill the Borak. And she said, the Borak? Yes, it's a living mushroom animal that eats other mushrooms or absorbs them. That's fascinating, she said. It'll be a great ingredient in my pizza. I can make the universe's largest pizza. We were thinking something else, said Darth. What's that? Have a theme park. People can fly by the restaurant and get great seats and watch the universe's largest mushroom as it is absorbing other mushrooms. It'll be a tourist attraction, and there'll be a lot of people buying pizza, especially mushroom pizza, because it'll get them hungry when they see that mushroom walking around on Planet Where. Where, she said. There. Oh, I see it. And she looked out the window, and sure enough, from the restaurant, you could see a giant mushroom creature kind of gobbling up, walking very slowly around on the huge Planet Where. And she agreed, and she put under her sign, it used to say Pizza Perfect, but now it says it used to say Punk Rock Pizza Perfect, and now it says Punk Rock Pizza Perfect, and then under that, it says Viewpoint, the closest seat to the giant mushroom in the universe, and scenic view of giant mushroom. And she put in all the tour guides that were pertinent and so forth. And creatures came from all over the galaxy, really from several other galaxies as well, to look at the giant Borak and buy the pizza. And she was so happy with the situation that sure enough, she gave the doctor, Jar Jar, Darth, Joe, Legatron, though Legatron gave his coupon to Darth and Joe because he didn't eat pizza, and Sally, all free coupons worth free pizza anytime they wanted to come in and eat free pizza. And from then on, they could eat it. Compliments of Penelope from Pizza Perfect, Punk Rock Pizza Perfect, the viewpoint of the giant mushroom of Where. By the way, the reason that you're not allowed to tell anybody that secret Darth and Joe story that I just told you was that the Guardians of the Universe are afraid that too many people would start going to Where to visit Borak, the giant mushroom. And you know how humans are. They're not going to pay attention to the rules and sit in the chair in the restaurant. They're going to go down to the planet and jump up and down on the mushroom. And pretty soon it'll be too many people and the mushroom will explode, setting millions of mushrooms across the universe, injuring people and blowing the restaurant way off course. So it's very important that humans don't find out about this story until they have learned to control their urge to jump up and down on giant mushrooms named Borak. All right, here's another story. This one's about Jar Jar, who was already trained to be a Jedi warrior, and he was walking around in the desert thinking, they should grow apples in this desert. This desert would be much better with apples. He's walking around, and suddenly he tripped. And he tripped on a stick. Jar Jar tripped on apple stick, and he looked at it and smelled it, but alas, it was not an apple stick. It was an ordinary piece of wood stick. And Jar Jar looked around, and there were no apples to be seen, and Jar Jar thought, Jar Jar, use Fun Ball Fun. And Jar Jar pulled out the big Fun Ball Fun and threw it and said, go find an apple for Jar Jar. And he threw it, and the Fun Ball Fun flew around, but it did not find an apple for Jar Jar because Jar Jar was in the middle of the desert and there were no apples. And then the Fun Ball Fun fell down, and it didn't even go to Jar Jar's hands. It fell down right on the desert floor. Huh? Said Jar Jar. Fun Ball Fun come to Jar Jar, and it stayed there. And Jar Jar walked over and picked up the Fun Ball Fun and threw it again, and the Fun Ball Fun flew around, and once again it didn't land in Jar Jar's arms. It went back to the same place on the ground. And Jar Jar did that again, and Jar Jar said, Fun Ball Fun, try to tell Jar Jar something about ground? And Jar Jar looked over where the Fun Ball Fun was landing, and he pushed away some of the sand, and there was a metal door in the ground leading down. And Jar Jar said, apple storage room? And he opened up the metal door, and Fun Ball Fun flew up in the air and looked scared. But Jar Jar said, Fun Ball Fun come to Jar Jar. And the Fun Ball Fun went back into Jar Jar's hands, and he saved it because, you know, he holds his Fun Ball Fun in a pouch in a parallel universe and carries them around so they're invisible when he's not actually using them. And Jar Jar went downstairs. It was a metal stairway. Clickety-cloppity, clippity-cloppity, clip-clop, clip-clop, clip-clop. And there were lots of rabbits down there. White rabbits with red eyes, and brown rabbits with really soft fur and really beautiful brown eyes. And there were giant rabbits with folds of skin who just flopped down on their sides and didn't move anywhere. And there were cute little bunny rabbits that looked like little kitty cats trying to nuzzle up and smell Jar Jar. And Jar Jar said, hello, rabbit friends. And one of the cute little rabbits said, Rah! And lunged up at Jar Jar's throat. And he had huge rabbit teeth. And he was going to try to kill Jar Jar. And Jar Jar said, run, ball, run, and started running away from the rabbits. But he started stepping on rabbits while he was running, and that made them really mad. And soon all of the rabbits became ferocious monsters chasing Jar Jar. And Jar Jar didn't know what to do, and he dived into a room. Just in time, they shut the door behind him, and only one rabbit got through in the room with him, and it was standing up on its back legs. It was much smaller than Jar Jar, but it was holding up his fists. It wanted to fight Jar Jar. Jar Jar did not want to fight Fun Rabbit Fun. And the rabbit ran at Jar Jar with his fist, and he punched Jar Jar in the ankle. And Jar Jar started hopping. Ouch, said Jar Jar. And he ran at Jar Jar again. And Jar Jar jumped out of the way and flipped up to the ceiling. And the rabbit was running so fast that he ran through a small entrance in the wall after he missed Jar Jar. And he went down a slide. And Jar Jar looked down the entrance. And you know what he smelled? Apples. But Jar Jar couldn't fit down entrance. Jar Jar looked for a little blue liquid to drink to make Jar Jar small, but Jar Jar couldn't find little blue liquid. Jar Jar's friend Darth and Joe would know what to do in a case like this, said Jar Jar. But Darth and Joe weren't there to figure out what to do, so Jar Jar started walking around in circles. Jar Jar must figure out how to make that door bigger, said Jar Jar. And as he was walking in circles in the room, thinking and thinking, the door started getting smaller. And he stopped and he looked, and the door stopped, and he started walking, and the door started getting smaller. And they said, Jar Jar, very worried, and he started walking the other direction in the room in circles, and the door started getting larger. And that's when Jar Jar realized when he walks in one direction in circles, it makes the door smaller. When he walks in the other direction, there are sensors underneath the floor that make the door bigger. So Jar Jar very quickly started walking as fastest around in circles to make the door very, very big, and he walked inside of it. And after him, the door got small again. But he was inside a big room with a stairway down and also a little slide down that the rabbit set down. And he could smell apples everywhere. And he went downstairs and he saw that it was some sort of bakery, and they had all thousands, millions of apples all mushed up like they were going to use it to bake. And sure enough, there was a chef there wearing a chef outfit, and the chef's name was Doobly-Doo. And Doobly-Doo was a famous apple chef. Appley-Doo, said Jar Jar, because Jar Jar had a subscription to Apple Monthly magazine and had been reading all about Chef Doodly-Doo and the amazing doodly 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 dishes that he made. That was his trademark, the doodly 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 doodly, etc. dishes. So Jar Jar really wanted to try some of Doodly Doo's apple dishes called Doodly 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 Dees, and some of his other apple dishes called Doodly 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 Dodos. And so he asked the chef, and when he was, at first the chef didn't know what he wanted because he just said, Apple want Jar Jar for food, Jar Jar want appley dish, appley doodle want Jar Jar doodle. And the chef thought, does Jar Jar want me to make him into a meal? No, Jar Jar want appley doodle. Oh, would you like an appley dee or a doodly 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 woe? And he gave some choices, and Jar Jar said, Jar Jar want all delicious appley dishes, doodles. And so the chef let Jar Jar taste them, and Jar Jar loved apples. And he said, told the chef which ones were the best ones, which ones could use a little less salt, and so forth. And the chef asked Jar Jar if he wanted a job tasting the food that he made down there in that place underground in the desert. And Jar Jar said, yes, Jar Jar want a chef tasting job. No, not chef tasting, food tasting, said the chef. Oh, Jar Jar want an apple taster Jar Jar, ready for work. And he got a job, and every day he went, and he would go there and taste the delicious apple foods. And you know how the chef paid him? In apples. Well, one day Jar Jar was walking home with his armload of apples that he'd been paid by the chef to taste the apple. It was the best job in the world for Jar Jar when you think about it. He gets to taste apple dishes all day, and at the end of the day, they pay him with apples. So Jar Jar was walking home through the desert when suddenly he met another Gungan who was much shorter. Her name was Betty Boop, and she was walking around and saying, "Me so no have cherries." And Jar Jar stopped and said, "Jar Jar want Gungan apple?" And he offered her an apple, and she said, "Oh, apple's okay. Me so love cherries." And Jar Jar said, "Jar Jar have cherries." Jar Jar, and then Jar Jar remembered the cherry-flavored ping-pong balls from the last story. Where did Jar Jar leave cherry-flavored ping-pong balls? Where? And he started scratching his head and walking in circles. And then he decided, Jar Jar listened to the tape, and he rewound the tape to the previous story, and he heard that he last had the ping-pong balls on Darth and Joe's ship. So he said, "You so wait here." "Oh, me so hungry," she said. "Okay, you so get on Jar Jar's back." And he put Betty Boop on his shoulders, and he started running, trying to hold all the apples too, which was very difficult, so he had to eat them while he ran, all the way to Darth and Joe's place. And he said, Darth Joe, open up." And Darth was asleep because it was actually past his bedtime. "What is this? Is there an emergency?" "Jar Jar need to get into Darth's ship for Jar Jar apple cherries for little Betty Apple Boop, banana cherry." And Darth didn't quite understand him, but he said, "Okay, here are the keys." Tossed the keys out the window, and Jar Jar went over and opened up the spaceship, and they got on board, and they started eating their apples. She started eating her cherries, and Jar Jar was eating his apples that he brought aboard. And they were having such a great time that, sure enough, Jar Jar accidentally flipped the ignition switch. The spaceship started going up, and Betty Boop said, "Cherry's so good, Betty Boop feels the earth move." And Jar Jar said, "Apple's so good, Jar Jar feels the earth move too." And Jar Jar and Betty Boop kept eating apples and cherries. Well, if you looked out the window, you could see that the city was getting farther and farther away, and soon the planet was getting farther and farther away. And the spaceship was going up, and Joe was lying in bed, and he was thinking, "Gosh, I thought I heard the spaceship take off, but Darth wouldn't go anywhere without waking me up." And so he went back to sleep. Well, pretty soon, sure enough, Jar Jar and Betty Boop were both out of their delicious fruit. They had no more fruit, and they looked around in the storage area, and there were some dried cherries that she tried, and there was an apple core or two that he had left there from before that he tried, but there was nothing else. No other fruit food. And they decided to go back out to Darth's house, so Jar Jar opened the door, and that's when he realized, boy, that first step's a doozy. They were way out in space. He couldn't leave the spaceship, so he quickly shut the door before all the air left the spaceship. And they started thinking, what does Jar Jar do? And Betty Boop said, Jar Jar fly spaceship. Oh yes, Jar Jar fly spaceship. Jar Jar fly spaceship. Jar Jar had never actually flown Darth and Joe's spaceship before though, so he wasn't quite sure how it worked. He sat down backwards on the chair, and he tried to reach for the controls, and Betty Boop said, "That's the air conditioner, Jar Jar." "Oh, yeah, right." Jar Jar turned around, started pressing some buttons, and the spaceship started moving in different directions. It was sideways, and it was going faster and faster sideways until it was about to smash into a star. And Betty Boop says, "What does this button do?" And she pressed it. "Light speed," said Jar Jar, and they started taking off. And eventually they pressed another button that stopped them, but they had no idea where they were. They were in front of a huge dark planet called Dark Planet. Huge. And it was enormous. It was much bigger than Planet Where. It was bigger than Jupiter. It was as big as a large solar system. All one dark black planet. And Jar Jar said, "Jar Jar not like it. Jar Jar go away. This not Apple Planet." And he tried to steer the spaceship away, but it kept getting pulled toward the planet. "Is it gravity of planet?" said Betty Boop. "Jar Jar not know," said Jar Jar. And Betty Boop took the controls and started trying to fly the spaceship away. But the more she tried to fly away, the more it got pulled in. And Jar Jar slammed fist and tail on control panel, and it turned on radio. And it was a voice saying, "And so, for the last time, we have warned you, and now we are taking you in." "Huh?" said Jar Jar, "Planet talking to us?" And sure enough, it was. And Jar Jar and Betty Boop grabbed the radio, and they both started talking. "We not go into planet. We looking for apple cherries. Apple cherries fly Darth and Joe's spaceship by accident. Get mixed up with big dark planet." "Dark planet, huge." The huge dark planet corrected them. "Right, dark planet, huge. We leave now." "You not leave." And it pulled them in, and pretty soon they found themselves landing. Well, you would think a planet that good would have crushing gravity. It was so massive, but it was an artificial planet, mostly hollow. So Darth and Joe and I mean not Darth because they were asleep. Betty Boop and Jar Jar left the spaceship, and they started walking around on Dark Planet, and some lights lit up on both sides of them, and an arrow, and a voice saying, "Walk this way." And Jar Jar said, "Which way? Like this?" And he started hopping on one foot, and Betty Boop laughed. "Ha ha ha. No, the way of the arrow." And Betty Boop said, "What if Betty Boop walk other way?" She turned around and started walking the other way, and that's when she walked right into a force field. And as soon as they started walking the other way, there was a force field behind them, kind of pushing them along, so they had to walk the walk this way. So they started walking that way, and there were lights flashing on either sides of them, and they got down they walked into a big black building, and on the black, the sky was black on this planet too. They couldn't really see much, and Jar Jar remembered that he had a lightsaber because he was a Jedi, and he pulled it open, but unfortunately when he pulled it out of his saber, it flicked open, it flew into the ceiling, and it stuck up there, and Jar Jar started jumping up to try to get it, and Betty Boop said, "Jar Jar, lift Betty Boop to get lightsaber cherry." And so Jar Jar lifted Betty Boop up on his hand because he was really small, and she started jumping, and she just was able to grab the handle of the lightsaber, but it was still stuck in the ceiling. But when she pulled, and eventually the lightsaber pulled open a small panel in the ceiling, and she was dangling from the panel, and she fell, and Jar Jar caught her, and they looked up, and it was some sort of opening, and they decided to go up and see what was inside that room. And so they looked around, and there were nothing but some black chairs that they hadn't seen before because everything was black in the room. And so they, black against black is hard to see. So they grabbed some of the chairs, and they stacked the chairs up underneath this hole in the ceiling that Jar Jar's lightsaber had opened up. And they went inside, and it was a giant computer control room. And they could see that it was controlling the voice of the planet because it would light up every time it said, "Walk this way." And they pressed the communicate button, which said communicate. And they said, "Why Computer Planet want us to walk this way?" And Computer Planet said, "You must save the people of BIM." "Save the people of BIM? We don't even know the people of BIM." And the Computer Planet said, "We warned you to stay away. You did not heed our warning. Now you must save the people of BIM. We need you. You must be our heroes. We will not let you leave until you save the people of BIM. By coming into our space near our planet, you have implicitly agreed to save the people of BIM. As part of your agreement, you must save the people of BIM. Okay, said Jar Jar. We save the people of Apple Planet. Oh, this not Apple Planet. This big dark planet. Look more like Raisin Planet. And so Betty Boop said, where are the people of BIM? And the voice said, the people of BIM are inside the dark planet Huge. How do we get there? Well, you could try walking this way, which is what I asked you to do before, but no, you had to come up into the tiny room in the ceiling and to the control room. Now get back down there and walk this way. And so they went back down through the hole in the ceiling, and they kept following the path that was all lit up for them. There was a little bit of music in the background, and they were walking and walking down the pathway till they came to an elevator. And they got inside the elevator, and it had 3 buttons. Well, it had 4 buttons. One was labeled up and out, one was labeled nowhere, and one was labeled BIM City, and another was labeled explode. Jar Jar liked this button, and he reached for the explode button, but Betty Boop said, no, Jar Jar, let's try this button. And she reached for the nothing button. Might make Jar Jar nothing, said Jar Jar. Betty Boop said, Betty Boop liked nothing cherries. And so she pressed it and nothing happened. So they decided to press the BIM City button, and they did, and they shot down. Whoosh, and their heads hit the ceiling, bonk, bonk, really hard because the elevator shot down so fast. But then they stood up again, and they ended up in a large city. Well, it was large for the people of BIM. So the people of BIM are smaller than your smallest fingernail. The city was only a few feet large. Easily, Jar Jar could have accidentally stepped on it and killed all the residents of BIM. So they had to be very careful, and especially because some people didn't live in the city itself. Some people lived in the outskirts and around the edges in the countryside of this interior planet. But the entire city of BIM and all of its surrounding communities was only a couple feet across. It was about as large as your legs. So Jar Jar and Betty Boop got down on the floor, and they looked very closely, and there was a small magnifying glass that was conveniently supplied by Dark Planet Huge. And so they looked through the magnifying glass, and actually there were 2 of them in case 2 people came to rescue the people of BIM. And they looked, and sure enough, they saw the people of BIM were waving at them, and they had big signs saying, please save us, thanks in advance. And we really appreciate being saved today. Thank you very much. Have a good day. They were very polite, the people of BIM. And so Jar Jar and Betty Boop looked around to see what the danger was. And then Betty Boop pointed on the ground at some tiny, tiny little yellow worms. Yellow worms of BIM? And the people started jumping up and down and cheering. Yes, very good. You have identified the problem quite early on. The giant yellow worms of BIM. And to the people of BIM, they weren't just tiny, 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 tiny worms. They were huge snakes as big as half a city block or larger, and they were all coming toward the people of BIM. There was a bad giant yellow snake infestation problem in the room where the city of BIM was located inside of this dark planet Huge. And so Darth and Joe weren't there. They were completely asleep. And so Jar Jar and Betty Boop would have to figure out what to do. So Jar Jar looked for something on him, and he couldn't find anything that would be useful. And he looked around the room, and the room was very dark. And he had left his lightsaber upstairs stuck to the ceiling, so that wasn't going to be any help in looking around. And the people started chanting something. They got very close to hear what they were chanting. And they were chanting, turn on the switch, turn on the switch, turn on the switch, turn on the switch. And they thought they heard a truck drive by, but it turns out that that was just part of the cheering sounds from the tiny people of BIM. And they looked around, and there was a switch on the wall. And so Betty Boop tried to jump up, but she was too short to reach it. So Jar Jar flicked it on, and it was a light switch. And now they could see much better. And they could see also there were some toys in the room. And where child? Where children, said Jar Jar. I don't know, just their toys are here. And then the dark planet said nothing because they were inside the dark planet, and it doesn't talk to people when you're inside of it. And so they found some building blocks, and they put them around the city to protect it, a protective wall. And they found some toy missiles, and they aimed them out. And sure enough, they were able to protect the city of BIM from the giant yellow worms who were not able to make their way through those building blocks. And so people of BIM were very happy, and they had many signs saying, "Thank you very much. Would you like a piece of rhubarb pie?" And Jar Jar said, "Sure." And he reached out his finger, and they gave him the tiniest. It was almost microscopic; they could hardly see it. "Thank you, and one for you too, miss." And they reached out and gave Betty Boop a tiny spot on her finger, which is rhubarb pie. And so Jar Jar and Betty Boop left the planet of BIM, went upstairs, and Jar Jar, in the elevator, Jar Jar in the elevator asked where children go whose toys they are. And that's when they heard Dark Planet Huge say, "Children grow up, leave toys there, giant worms, no longer kept from attacking city of BIM, needed rescuer." Oh, that's great. Well, we did our job. There's only one more button to press. But first, let's stop Jar Jar need Jar Jar lightsaber. And he opened the elevator door, and they were back up on the floor they were before. And Betty Boop stood up, and Jar Jar stood on her shoulders and jumped up and grabbed the lightsaber and pulled it out of the ceiling. And then they went back in the elevator, and they decided to press up and out, and the elevator shot them up into outer space. And it was like a TARDIS, but it was just an elevator booth. And eventually it had a parachute, and it floated down